Is Russia reorganizing its logistics and force generation to prepare for a long, protracted conflict? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's April 28th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map. You can see the only changes to the front lines are a small block in which Russian forces have advanced. Again, they control the vast majority of Bakhmut at this point. And Ukrainians are defending just the western outskirts. When we look over at the combat map, you can see again Russian forces spreading their efforts somewhat. You can see here Kreminna Lyman. You've got, a cluster of offensive action by Russia, concentrated offensive action in Bakhmut and on the northern front, and of course continued pushing in the southern prong of Avdiivka. Total of 65 Russian attacks yesterday, which is actually a fairly high number by current standards. Remember, during their big offensive, that offensive output was measured sometimes in the hundreds of attacks a day, over 100. Now it's just 65. So that itself is pretty interesting. What's also interesting is that Russia hosts the International Army Games. This is the sort of the War Olympics, and are a symbol of Russia's military primacy. The U.S. does not participate, but many other countries do send their Olympic team members. The U.S., instead of doing military-specific games, will actually have any Olympic sport. The U.S. military will actually sponsor those athletes for a season. So if you are a U.S. Army soldier, for example, you may be allowed to take off, I think it's up to like 6 months of a year in order to train exclusively for your event. There we go. U.S. Army Olympic athletes. It's called the Army World Class Athlete Program, and we have a bunch of Olympians. In 2022, Sergeant Emily Sweeney won. Let's try to find. Okay, well, we had Sergeant Emily Sweeney, women's luge singles, specialist Frank DeLuca, and specialist Hakeem Abdul Sabor, 2-man bobsled, 4-man bobsled, a 10K. Individual Gunderson, specialist Benjamin Loomis, men's individual Gunderson, large hill, cross-country skiing. There you go. PFC Jasper Good, another cross-country skiing, and another cross-country skiing. For a lot of these athletes, this is probably and potentially one of the best ways, right? There's not a ton of money in cross-country skiing events. So in order to get your health insurance, benefits, a regular salary paid in order to train and compete full-time really can make a huge difference for some of these athletes, especially in smaller sports that don't have a large like contingent following them. So really interesting stuff. And you can see there's also, of course, coaches assigned, actually Olympic medalist coaches. Really interesting program. That's sort of how the U.S. Army does it. Russia, of course, has their war games, but they've been canceled. It's seen both as a frivolous expenditure of resources, but also there's a concern that Russia's best troops are not training and participating in these war games, meaning that Russia's usual dominance of the Army Olympics, so to speak, is in jeopardy. So, but really, that's just, I think, a small emblem of just how bad Russia's logistics and force generation capabilities are. The reason is Russian military command seems to be really just heads are rolling, proverbially. Don't worry, YouTube. Don't demonetize me. You guys know my struggles with YouTube demonetization. That's why I've launched combatvetnews.com. Combatvetnews.com is my own website where I have not just all of the latest news stories that I don't have a chance to get to in my daily updates, all of my YouTube videos for free. And if you want to support what I do, you can become a member and get access to members only content, including viral videos. We're dropping a new one today, but it's the helmet cam footage, the combat videos that YouTube just won't let me show you. I do all those breakdowns now on combatvetnews.com. Thanks again to all our supporters there. Okay, so talking about this Russian military shakeup, that for example, the Deputy Defense Minister of the Russian Federation for Logistics, probably one of the highest roles that you can have as a logistician, has been replaced. It's now Colonel General Alexei Kuzmenikov, who is head of the Russian National Guard. And there are rumors that it's actually a result of a surprise combat readiness check for troops of the Northern Fleet, carried out by, of course, a VDV colonel and Wagner-affiliated Mikhail Teplinsky. And this is sort of interesting because, again, this may represent not just part of a improvement in readiness effort, but it may actually reflect the increasing infiltration of Wagner into the Russian military establishment. Right? Some troops in the front may have not been receiving necessary weapons, et cetera, et cetera. But again, if this is someone who is politically protected, none of that would matter. And the Wagner Group certainly has been a huge critic of the Russian logistics enterprise, as ISW points out. And it may reflect, again, that the problems that Wagner has pointed out are being taken seriously by the Kremlin, or at least by Wagner-backed higher-level people at the Kremlin. So it's also interesting to see, again, in September, there was a replacement as the head of logistics and Russian National Defense Control Center. There's been a number of these switch-ups, and it may be indicative, again, since they are not necessarily in charge of troops that engage in combat today, but they are responsible collectively for force generation, the ability to take civilians and turn them into trained, capable troop formations, troop sustainment, the ability to provide troops with beans and bullets, so to speak, medical care, all the classes of logistics, and logistical oversight, right? And especially logistical oversight. This has been one of the largest failings of the Russian military, though force generation is a close second. This is the corruption endemic to the Russian military that has bled out the Russian military of many of its key resources, key military resources that they need, right? This was even in the initial invasion, you saw Russian troops who didn't have optics for their weapons. And the reason is not because Russia didn't make enough optics for them. It's that those optics were diverted and resold, sometimes even to the U.S. Now, Russian force generation, of course, has also been a problem as we've seen more and more poorly trained troops at the front, troops panicking, just a general indicator that there's not a lot of experience or training at work in preparing these troops to go to the front lines. So these two areas are where reform is most badly needed. But if there is a reform, let's say you could snap your fingers and create a perfect force generation system, it would still be months before that would affect troops actually arriving on the battlefield, similar to fixing a logistics system. Even if you could snap your fingers and implement a new logistics system, it would be, again, weeks before troops would actually feel better equipped on the front lines. So it's a sign to me that Russia is really planning on, I don't want to say delaying, but that Russia is thinking about the long game at this point. They really believe they're going to be in Ukraine for the long haul. There's not discussion of a final offensive or things ending this year. So that, I think, is the sign or the takeaway from this news. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. As always, thank you so much to our combatvetnews.com members. We are going to be dropping a new video today. I'm literally going to record it right after this. We're going to check out some combat footage from the combat footage subreddit, which is always wild. Thanks to our Colonel tier members. Thanks to our Lieutenant tier members. And thanks to all of our members. I'll see you guys in the next one.